Maria, I am so excited to talk to you about all things plants. How are you?
Hey, me too. And your pod. I've really been enjoying your podcast because I'm not a minimalist, so I've learned a lot from you, and I'm definitely trying to apply it to my life. So thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. I'm guessing you would say you're likely a plant maximalist. And so I'm looking forward to gleaning all your wisdom about plants and about podcasting. Let's start by you telling us who you are, what the Growing Joy podcast is about. Tell me all of it.
So I'm Maria. I host the Growing Joy podcast. It's the top houseplant care and garden podcast out there. I help people care for plants successfully and cultivate joy in their lives. I'm also the author of Growing Joy, the Plant Lover's Guide to Cultivating Happiness. It's a self-help book about how to use plants to live a happier life. And all of this came about. I'm actually a epic plant killer. So, whoever's listening, if you are not a plant person, if you have killed plants before, I'm there with you. I've done whatever you've done to your plants, I've done way weirder and way worse stuff. I was a professional musical theater performer, so I was traveling a lot. I was just trying to take care of myself as I was on the road with musicals like Cats and The Sound of Music. I wasn't trying to like care for other things besides me. Um, and when I moved in with my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, but I it was my first real home that I was really excited to nest in. And I decided that even though I had this horrific history of killing any plant that I brought home, that I would give plants one more try in an effort to kind of bring life and, just this like cozy feeling into our home. If you look at any magazine, all of these interior design magazines, all the Pinterest photos have these beautiful plants as part of the interior design aspect. And we also had a tiny little balcony garden. And what I like to say is I came for the aesthetic of plants, but I stayed for the wellness. So I was living in 500 square feet in New York City. I was so overstimulated, so overscheduled. I woke up with my phone in the morning. I had coffee with my phone in the morning. And when I started caring for plants, I started having coffee with my plants instead. And that simple shift, it's the first chapter of my book. It's called Look at a Plant Before You Look at a Screen in the Morning. That's like my main practice. It changed my life. It helped me connect with myself. It helped me connect back to nature. And in those moments of connection, I'm a self help junkie, and it was wild that I'd spent, thousands of dollars on therapy and yoga retreats and juice cleanses and all sorts of like wackadoo, therapeutic stuff. And it was these, affordable little pots of plants that were bringing me the most joy and, seeing my life reflected back in them. And so I launched the podcast 5 years ago. It used to be called Bloom and Grow Radio. Now it's called Growing Joy, in an effort to help other people like me, maybe plant killers, people who didn't know how to care for plants, learn how to successfully care for them in order to experience these incredible shifts in life that I was experiencing. And when I launched it, it was the only podcast about houseplants out there. There's certainly more now, but it's been a wild ride, and here we are, full-time podcasters together.
Well, your answer there really spoke to first the aesthetics that plants bring into a home. I know probably many of my listeners, they associate houseplants with the minimalist aesthetic. There's something about bringing the outside in that's very powerful when we talk about creating that calming haven out of a home. But you also mentioned the wellness aspect. And so I'm wondering, if we can drill down on the why, for listeners who are listening right now and are thinking to themselves, I do not have the time, the mental energy, the space in my life to add another living thing onto my already overflowing to-do list. What would you say to those listeners?
Well, first off, it's about picking plants that work for you, not working for your plants, right? So if you are an overstimulated, overworked person that doesn't have an hour a day to do their plant care routine, there are plenty of plants that are hardy, drought tolerant, low light tolerant that you can put in your life to enjoy the benefits, the proven benefits of having plants indoors without having to have another thing on your to-do list. Because let's be real, the minute it goes on the to-do list is the minute you don't want to do it, right? You want to be able to get up and feel excited to care for something. Um, the last 5 years has been this exploration of why do plants make us feel so good? It's weird. Like when you start caring for plants, and I've spoken at this point to thousands of members of my community, and I thought that it was a weird personal thing that I was going through. This feeling of when I started successfully caring for plants, all of a sudden, it was all I could think about. It was bringing me so much joy. I was sitting on my balcony singing to my plants, like a seemingly crazy person. It didn't feel crazy to me, but was this part of my heart that opened up, and I was like, well, I'm a naturally dramatic person. I'm an actress. Maybe this is just my own thing. But then I started hearing from so many members of my community that you experience this um connection in a way that you haven't felt before. So the reason why plants can, there are so many reasons why plants are worth taking the time to learn how to care for, to incorporate into your lifestyle. Once again, into your lifestyle, not adding something to your to-do list. um there's this concept that I know personally I've experienced, that I think a lot of other people have experienced, is it's called plant blindness. It's been written about by scientists and papers published about it. I prefer to call it plant bias instead of plant blindness, because I feel like that's a little insensitive. But it's this concept that, if you think about our grandparents, they were in nature as human beings, as, humans with our nervous systems were created and evolved in nature. It is natural for us to be surrounded by living things, and that's where our nervous systems feel calmest. And as society has grown and technology has come in, and these large cities have been built, and people live in little ant farms, myself included. I lived in 500 square feet. No person should live in 500 square feet, especially with another human. I was living with my husband. We become farther and farther disconnected to nature. And our bodies don't want that. Our bodies want to be around nature. There's this other concept called biophilia, which was penned in the 70s by E.O. Wilson. And it talks about how, as humans, as living things, we are intrinsically hardwired to feel connected to other living things. So, a lot of people experience this biophilic effect with pets. You feel the minute you pet your dog or your cat, there is some calming sensation that rushes over your body, right? It's that likeness of being around other living things. But plant blindness then comes into play and dissociates us from the fact that nature and plants are living. But when you start getting in a garden, when you start caring for plants, you start tapping back into that feeling of, that you get from having a pet. But really, plants are way more low maintenance than a pet. So, as I'm, a new bird mom and have spent the last month just like freaking out over everything my bird does, I don't have to freak out about everything my plants do. So, I think from a people talk about nervous system regulation a lot right now, and there's all these different fancy biohacking things that you can do. Like, being in nature is number one for just feeling calmer. And there's a lot of studies now that have proven that, forest bathing, which is the practice of going and spending time like in literal nature in the forest, has incredible effects from a cellular level on your body. Different studies, I go over them in my book, but people who have access to green space are going to have less risk of depression. Like, there's all of these incredible studies that kind of show these things. And so bringing plants indoors is it's step one, right? A lot of us don't have time to get in the car, go to a forest, go spend 60 minutes in a forest, 3 times a week. That's so ideal. I wish we all had that opportunity, but we don't. So having a few plants and trying to kind of recreate that bond and recreate this experience of spending time with them can help us kind of connect to this part of our natural selves that has been, for lack of a planty term, lying dormant for a while.
Well, I see what you did there with your dormant reference. I like it. I like a good pun. What about air quality, though? I was always under the impression that adding a houseplant or two or one into every room was a great way to improve air quality. Is that true?
Yeah. This is a very good question. So, there is some like fake news swirling around about plants. And so, with the air quality, and I have a chapter on this in my book. So, basically, what happened is in the 70s and 80s, NASA did this big study that was trying to prove that plants do through their natural processes, remove volatile organic compounds, VOCs, from the air. These studies that were really incredible, it proved that plants do clean the air. So yes, you're right, they do. But you have to think about the studies and the conditions that these studies were done. So they were in completely airtight rooms that had no windows, no airflow, no forced heating, no air conditioning. This very controlled environment. So in order so since then, so people use those NASA studies in these marketing efforts with plants to say, yeah, this plant cleans the air, this plant cleans the air. When you think about all of the different, heating, air conditioning, windows open, all of these things that affect our homes that aren't exactly the same as this NASA study, you're not going to get that same effect. But yes, these plants do neutralize something. And I think, should you bring plants home? But I don't think that they're going to be as effective as an air purifier. um they're probably doing something positive to your air quality, but to what level we don't really know because everybody's home environment is so different that you can't really measure it. The other thing is I was reading something that it says in order to kind of get the desired effect of this air purification equal to an air purifier, you have to have like, I think it was like 10 plants for every square foot. And like it, you have to have an excessive amount of plants to enjoy it. I mean, at my peak of my plant maximalism, I had 160 plants in 500 square feet. So that was a lot of plants. My husband says that he felt the air quality, being different. I don't know to what level scientifically that was true, but I also think you just feel better being surrounded by that many plants, so yeah, I see so many people talking about air quality. Yes, they do neutralize volatile organic compounds at what rate in our environments, I don't know. So I do want to arm your listeners with the real truth, even if it's kind of, disappointing. And I wish I could tell you, one plant will be better than a, filtration system, but not exactly. But there are plenty of other benefits that make it worthwhile.
Well, what I love about talking to you, Maria, is you really explain the benefits of caring for a plant on your own personal wellness. I will say for me, however, I have probably in my whole house maybe 15 plants, and I am a novice plant person at best. And I would say that for me, when a plant's health goes south, it does the opposite for my wellness. It's a stress inducer as opposed to a stress reliever. So what I would love to do with you today is to do a plant care crash course for my listeners of sorts. Like, what are the skills and steps we need to take to reduce the chances that our plants, which traditionally provide wellness opportunities, actually provide stress and anxiety into our lives? So we want to keep these plants alive. So I have a bunch of questions for you that really I am just so excited to ask as a novice plant um, keeper, a plant keeper. Is that even a phrase? But okay, as a novice plant parent. And the first one is it possible to have, let's say, 5 plants and all the supplies you need for those 5 plants without spending an exorbitant amount of money?
Oh, for sure. Um, 5 plants. So, my whole collection of plants is in terracotta pots. Terracotta, that gorgeous, those gorgeous classic terracotta pots that you see at every, store. And those pots are extremely affordable. I mean, I think the most I'll spend on a terracotta pot is maybe 9.99, and that's for a 14-inch pot. So, you can get the biggest thing. So, the beauty of plant care is you can spend almost nothing on plants and have a really beautiful collection, and you can spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on this plant collection. I mean, like, I guess any sort of collectible thing, right? Like there's definitely room to play with here. So um all I would say that you really need is a bag of high quality soil. um Depending on, only 5 plants, that's probably just 1 bag, right? I use Espoma Organic. You can use whatever you want, but I highly recommend using organic soils, especially if you have if you have pets or if you have children. So I would say where you invest is the potting mix. And definitely don't go outside, dig up some dirt, and then pot houseplants in that dirt because houseplants, obviously, when they're indoors, they don't have the same conditions. They're not getting rained on. There's not wind. There's not extreme bouts of heat that dry the soil out. So that dirt is way too dense. It's going to stay way too saturated. It's going to have way too much clay in it. So get the bagged potting mix. If you're going to invest in anything, like don't save there. Get the potting mix if you're going to have houseplants. You can go terracotta pots, which are super affordable. You can also go upcycled jelly jars. If you have upcycled, I see people convert their Talenti, ice cream jars. I love that caramel cookie crunch Talenti ice cream. I've seen people upcycle those jars. So you could probably look around your home, look in your refrigerator, see what might be time to upcycle. Mason jars also are incredible. The other thing that I've found a habit of doing is going to thrift shops, and you can get incredible deals on vessels at thrift shops, like for $1. I bought like a beautiful bowl for $1, and you can easily turn that into a pot with one drill, just drilling some holes in the bottom. So I think you can get really creative there. And I think pots is where people can really overspend, because they're all so pretty and we want the really pretty ones, but I think you can totally get creative there. And then with plants, you're obviously, if you're going to buy them, you're going to have to go spend money. Um, there are way more affordable plants. There are super rare plants, right? You can buy a nice 6-inch pothos at a local garden center for probably $9.99, or you could buy a 6-inch pink princess philodendron for $100. So it depends upon what type of plants you want to bring home. But if you want to start with your basic classic pothos, philodendron, snake plants, some Hoyas are getting really affordable. There's really affordable ways. Now, you can get plants for free. If you have friends that have plants, you can take cuttings of their plants. There are cuttings groups on Facebook as well that frequently offer free plants. So cuttings are, if I had Stephanie, if I had, and I'm happy to send you some cuttings if you want after this interview. But, I have a great plant that's really vigorous. And so what I'll do is take a few cuttings of the tips of some of the stems, where roots can grow, pop them in water, root them up, give them to you. And then all you have to do is plant those in soil, and the plant will be very robust. So I've been at this for 5 or 6 years. I went to a few plant swaps when I was starting out 5 years ago. I got this one monstera plant. It had 5 leaves. It was tiny. It was in a 4-inch pot. And over the last 5 years, it's grown into the most epic monstera. And it's in like an 8 or 10-inch pot now. It's got fenestrated leaves. It's got those big fenestrated leaves, which are the big monstera leaves with the holes in them, that you see everywhere. But yeah, getting small cuttings and then nurturing them and letting them grow into these more lush plants is a very affordable way of growing your plant collection as well. So that's what I would say is the start. So, considering your bag of soil, you could probably start with a few plants for like $20.
Yeah, I your answer there makes me make comparisons between the hobby of indoor plant care and any other hobby. As minimalists, right, listeners, we're not going to go 0 to 100 and buy all the stuff, especially for a hobby we might not stick with, right? We're going to go to our local buy nothing group. I know my buy nothing group, people are asking for and people are giving away cuttings of their plants all the time. So why would I go to my local garden center and pay $10 when I could get something for free. That's just me personally.
Absolutely. And like, I don't know, from an energetic perspective, I see people moving and giving their plants away so much. And like those plants are going to be displaced. Like that's so sweet that you might be able to take a plant. And also if you're a beginner, ideally that plant's lived a nice life indoors. So you just have to take that plant. It's already established, it's already thriving. The owner will tell you what they've been doing to the plant to keep it alive, and all you have to do is try and replicate that. Because sometimes when you buy in garden centers, you know, those plants are raised, those plants are grown in perfect conditions under grow lights with really intense fertilizer, and then you bring it home and you kind of go through this transition period. So if you can eliminate that, I totally agree with you. Like the buy nothing groups are amazing. I've gotten great plants in buy nothing groups before.
And then you mentioned pots as well. I am of the persuasion to search thrift stores or again buy nothing or ask my neighbors. But is there something I should be doing to secondhand pots? Should I be disinfecting them? And if so, how?
You know, I think this is probably to everybody's different level of comfort. I would definitely wash all the pots that I bring home with soap and water. You want to make sure that, you know, because sometimes with the pots, you know, there's dried soil on the inside. Give it a really good soak. Make sure all that old soil is out. You don't know what like fungal or, you know, whatever's going on. If you get secondhand terracotta, people treat the terracotta by soaking them, submerging them in water and like fully soaking the terracotta because terracotta is very porous and it absorbs water. So you can give it like a really nice dunk. But I would definitely say disinfecting just with, you know, I do soap and water. If you want to go bleach, if you want to go, you know, more hardcore, that's fine. But for me, a good soap and water moment is totally good. But yeah, definitely I'd say before you put another plant in, be careful there.
Talk to me about the conditions of the home. My home in the winter here in New England is really cold, like 62 degrees. It's a dark home. It's not humid, only, maybe 2 months a year is it humid. So talk to me about the house. Are my plants doomed?
Yeah, no, I great question. And this is where I think with these buy nothing groups that you're in, this is where you have to do the research first before you get in the buy nothing groups because, you know, you're going to get this random assortment of plants that you might not, you know, if you go to a garden center, you're going to be able to choose exactly what you want. You're going to have limited selection in these buy nothing groups. So do your research first and let me tell you what you need to know. So, okay, first off, plants are pretty hardy. If you choose, so you need low maintenance hardy plants, Stephanie. I know. So I have a plant parent personality test on my website. Anyone is welcome to go take it. It's free. It takes 2 minutes. But basically, you take a couple questions and I learn what your personality type is. I give you, you know, your personality profile and recommended plants for that personality. You're definitely a low maintenance plant parent. I can tell. And I think you'll need, you know, these low maintenance, hardy, low light plants. So, understanding your natural light environment is really important. And I think a lot of people overestimate how much light they're getting. You bring up a great point. In the wintertime, your house is going to be even darker than in the summer. People deal with trees, you know, especially we're both in the Northeast, deciduous trees. So maybe in the summer, you're actually shaded because you have trees outside your windows. But in the winter, those leaves fall and then you have some sunlight. So you have to be a super sleuth looking at your own house and figuring out where are my windows? What direction do they face? So this is a very easy way to assess generally your lighting opportunities. So if you have southern facing windows, those are generally going to be the most light availability because the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, it's always in the south. So the sun is going to be shining there. Second strongest is going to be western exposure windows, because as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, it gets a little bit hotter and a little bit stronger. Next is going to be eastern exposure windows. That's that gentle, beautiful morning light. That's good for like a medium light plant. And then northern facing windows are sadly your kind of worst option. You definitely have your most limited opportunity with northern facing windows because they're pretty much not getting direct sunlight. Once again, you have to be a super sleuth. Do you have trees in front of your windows? Do you have a building blocking your sun? You know, I had in one of my apartments in New York City beautiful, huge southern facing windows, but I had a building right in front of me blocking all of the sun. So I had the equivalent of a northern facing window. So you very astutely have already assessed that you're not getting that much light. So that puts you in the low light plant category. And because your house is cold, I would also say you need to be in the hardy plant category. If you think about it, deserts experience wide ranges of cold and hot, right? Like these plants are pretty hardy. They have to survive outside in like pretty intense conditions. So cold is okay. Drafty can be tricky with certain types of plants. Um obviously plants don't want to be constantly, in drafty conditions. But I've seen, I have some snake plants that sit out in front of one of the draftiest windows in my space, and they're okay. So if you're low light, if you're cold, and you're probably experiencing, how warm does your house get in the summer? Because New England is obviously hot in the summer.
Yeah, I would say maybe low 80s.
Low 80s, yeah. So I would say, you absolutely can have plants, but you're going to have to be really specific in what you choose. So I would recommend snake plants would be your best friend here. They're the most forgiving plants ever. Pothos and philodendron, also low light tolerant, hardy. I mean, one of my first houseplants was a pothos, and I say, gosh, I learned so many lessons on it, and I almost killed this thing so many times. I have done everything to this poor plant, and it keeps just bouncing on back for me. It's like the plant that gives me unconditional love and acceptance. So I would say pothos, philodendron if you want something to sit on a bookshelf shelf and like trail down. If you want floor-based plants, snake plants, structural, gorgeous. Those long, sharp leaves look incredible. ZZ plants have smaller leaves but can also grow very tall. Dracaena can be really, really hardy. Um, yeah, I would say that's where you start. But yeah, you just have to be aware. Ideally, not so much on the drafts, but I got to tell you, I live in a really drafty house and I have my plants, there. In the winter, we have people in our community that like seal their windows, with some tape, or, some plastic wrap. I mean, sealing your windows, it's also really good for your energy efficiency. We ended up buying those like draft, you can also make them, but what are they called? Like draft guards. They're basically like bean bags that you put in front of your drafty doors that have made a difference. And that's just based in, your personal tolerance. We've noticed they've made a really nice difference in our house. But yes, you can absolutely have plants in low light environments. You also just want to watch your watering in a low light environment, because that water, the plant is going to use the water slower, because it doesn't have as much light. So plants make their food with light. No light, no food, dead plant, right? So the plants need light. You can't put a plant in a bathroom with no windows. They need access to light. However, so sorry, not however. So with that low light environment, they're not going to need as much water. So, say you buy a snake plant and it says, the care card says water it once every 2 weeks. Before you, and on that second week, when you go to water that snake plant, touch the soil and don't water it again unless the soil is dry. Some people get into this problem where instead of kind of learning about their own environment, they just go by prescribed care cards that come with the plants, and then they end up overwatering or underwatering their plants because they're not like being sensitive enough. They're not checking in with their actual plant to see what it needs, if that makes sense.
Talk to me about fertilizer. Do I need to fertilize my plants?
So I feel like this is a tricky as the plant expert, I want to tell you, yes, you should fertilize your plants. And fertilizer could be very affordable. I use Espoma organic indoor plant food for my house plants. It's organic. You put it in your watering can and you water. Um, you don't need to fertilize your plants all year round. Fertilize your plants when they're growing. That's usually spring, summer. So you can choose to only fertilize your plants, in the spring and summer or whenever they're growing to kind of save on those costs. I will also tell you that for the first 3 years of caring for plants, I never fertilized them, right? So houseplants don't need as much. If you're growing tomatoes outdoors, you absolutely need to feed your plants. Um, edible plants that you're growing, require a lot more nutrition, a lot more fertilizer, a lot more plant food. House plants, especially if you're in a if you're in a low light environment, they're probably not going to use through that nutrition as quickly. Um, so you can take that advice with a grain of salt. But yes, I fertilize my plants when they're growing with organic fertilizer. I don't recommend the banana method or the eggshells. Um, those hacks don't really convert to the nutrition that your plants really need. So I would say either do it, like fertilize your plants with real fertilizer, or don't. I don't find the banana water like makes a tremendous difference.
And how do I know when to repot my plants? I have a Christmas cactus that is now too big for its pot. Is repotting into a bigger vessel what you do when the plant is just too big? How do I know? Does the plant give me any signs that it's time to be repotted?
Yeah. So how do you when you say it's too big for its pot, what is it doing to make you say that?
It just doesn't look as vibrant as it once did. First of all, it's big and the pot is kind of small, and it's just kind of I don't really even have the words to describe what it's doing. It doesn't look as healthy as it did before, I guess is the best way to put it.
So that's a moment where it might need some fertilizer as well, if it's been in the same pot. So think about in nature, plants have infinity amount of soil, right? Their roots can grow as wide as they need to find water and to find nutrients. In this pot, when a plant is left in a pot for too long, it soaks up all of the nutrients of that existing soil and then there's nothing left. So it could be nutrient deficiency that your plant has, or time to repot. And there's multiple reasons why it's time to repot. So number one, like you mentioned, if the plant is getting too big and it's tipping over your pot, tipping over the small pot that it's in, that's definitely time. Other I guess symptoms of time to repot is if you see roots growing out of the bottom of the pot. So if the pot has holes in it, by the way, if you're a beginner plant parent, I recommend having holes in your pots. Um, it's way easier to understand when your plant needs to be watered. What a lot of people do is they put them in pots that have no holes. They water the plant, the water sits at the bottom of the pot. The roots sit in that water, they rot and die, and then the plant has no way of taking up water and the plant dies. So that's like, I used to do that to my plants all the time when I was a plant killer. So I would say, like, if you're a newbie, put holes in your pots, whether it's buying the terracotta or upcycling finding terracotta or just drilling them into pots that you find and salve, at a thrift shop. Anyway, what were we talking? Oh, yeah, pots. So with pots, if you see the plant start raising above the pot, like there's so many roots and the plant almost looks like it's trying to jump out of the pot, that's a sign that it's time to repot. Roots growing out of the bottom of the pot is a sign that there's so many roots at the bottom of that pot that they're just trying to scramble out anywhere. If the plant is limp, if you water the plant and it takes up all the water and the soil dries out like within the next day or more, if you're noticing you have to water more frequently, these are all signs that there's so many roots in that pot that we need to upgrade. Another really easy way to check if it's time is to just take the plant out of the pot and see if the roots are pot bound. And the way that you know if the roots are pot bound is at the bottom of the pot, you'll notice if the roots start growing in usually circles if it's a circular pot, but if roots start growing along the route of the bottom of the pot, that can be really bad. The roots can start growing in these circles and choke themselves out. So that's when it's time to upgrade. When you upgrade to your pot, or not upgrade, but when you pot up your plant, general rule of thumb is 2 inches. So if your plant is in a 4 inch pot, only put it in a 6 inch pot. If it's in a 6 inch pot, only put it in an 8 inch pot. Don't take a plant that's in a 4 inch pot and put it in a 10 inch pot, because what's going to happen is there is going to be so much soil in that pot and the roots are not going to be able to expand and soak up all of that water. So if you have watered soil in a 10-inch pot and almost no roots, that water is going to take way too long to evaporate out of the plant, and that's another scenario where roots can rot and then the plant dies. So yeah, 2 inches is my general rule of thumb that I tell people.
So helpful, Maria. Thank you. Before we wrap up today, I was wondering if we could do a quick little symptom and solution. So I am a big, like, when I have a symptom of something that looks wrong on me, I go to I go to Google, I doom scroll, yeah. And so I'm wondering if we could do that for plants. So you tell us a common plant symptom, maybe like browning leaves or limping branches or whatever it is, and then tell us what the problem is and how to fix it. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay. Um, I'm getting a lot of DMs right now. We're in the winter when we're recording this, so I'm getting a lot of DMs about brown leaves. So, what a lot of people don't realize with their plants is they're super sensitive to heat. They're super sensitive. You think, oh, plants want 80 degrees, but this forced dry heat that we use to heat our homes, plants are not fans of. So, what I see a lot of people in our community is they have their plants thriving in the spring and summer. Fall comes, heat kicks on. They don't realize that their plants are like next to or right above a radiator, a floor heater, and all of a sudden they start getting these scorched leaves. If browning is what's the word I'm looking for? If browning is uniform, so if a plant has browning all around the edges of the leaf, that's normally a sign of too dry. You're probably near that heat source, right? Or, you have a super dry house and you have a humidity loving plant. So once again, that's not the right plant for your lifestyle. Um, if there are brown spots in the center of the leaf, that could be a fungal infection, and you can treat that with fungicide. Um, which once again, I love Espoma, so I use their fungicide, but you can get a fungicide very affordably at any garden center. Yellow leaves on the other side. So the issue is when you go to start doom scrolling online with plants, all of these answers are so specific to your environment and what's going on. So, people send me DMs, what's wrong with my plant? The leaves are brown. And I'm like, okay, send me a video of your plant. Send me photos. What have you recently been doing? Like, you have to become the sleuth with their personal environment. Um, so when you Google brown leaves or yellow leaves, many times brown and yellow leaves can be the same. So overwatering could look like brown or yellow leaves, and underwatering can look like brown or yellow leaves. But generally, overwatering is a yellow leaf. So if you're noticing that, a lot of your leaves are yellow, it's looking very like limp, um, that might be a sign of overwatering. Um, let's see, what else do I always get DMs about? Plants that are leggy, so plants that are like toppling over. Um, if they're growing like super long, but there aren't a lot of leaves on the stem, that's a sign that the plant is searching for light. So you probably need to put it in more light. Um, I have an example. I have a beautiful begonia in my eastern facing window. And this is also very normal. This is just a practice that you should do. So my begonia is getting plenty of light in my eastern facing window. It's super happy. But there's this thing called phototropism. So plants' leaves will naturally turn towards the sunlight in order to, get max exposure to photosynthesize and make the food that they need. So what we notice is, every couple of weeks we notice, oh wow, the plant has moved all of its leaves facing the window and we're not being able to look at the gorgeous pink polka dot leaves that it has. So we have to rotate the plant. So you rotate your pot to make sure that the plant doesn't start leaning too much. But once you see those interlongated leaves, like really stretched out, like unhappy looking leaves, that's a sign of light deficiency. A lot of the solution is light deficiency for many different issues, because light is how the plant makes food, right? You mentioned low lights as well, and I know this is I know this is a minimalist podcast, and I feel like I keep giving you guys recommendations on what to buy, but I have to say, as a solution, if you have a low light home, there are super affordable grow lights that you can get, that are even just light bulbs that you just switch out, in your floor lamps. You can just put your grow light bulb into a floor lamp, or I have a frame that has a grow light in it above my desk that I have all my Hoyas in. So there are opportunities. If you want highlight plants, you can supplement with grow lights. You can do it in a very affordable way. I just disclaimer. Um, but let's see what else. Bugs. People get thrips, spider mites, scale, mealybugs. Pest infestations usually are a sign that your plant is like a little unhappy. Um, Pests can like sense unhappy plants, and that's when they descend. First protocol with pests, identify it if you can. Google common houseplant pests online, and there'll be a blog that comes up with all the different photos. Um, you're going to want to rinse the plant with short bursts to get the pests off of the plant, and then you're probably going to need to treat the soil. There's different treatments based on whatever pest you're working with, and you can find them on Google. But a lot of pest mitigation can be done with water and gentle soap, or water and hydrogen peroxide. So there's no fancy things that you need to buy there.
People love to give me orchids, and they give them to me when they're, in perfect bloom. They're gorgeous and I enjoy them. And then the flowers fall off and the plant's alive, but they don't rebloom. So what's the problem?
This is more than a simple solution. Like, this is more than a 30-second answer problem. I have a whole episode on orchids on my podcast. I interview an orchid expert and we dive deep into this. Basically, orchids need to rebloom a period of cold, and it's the amount of light that they get that triggers it. So some people, once their orchid, once the flowers not once the flowers are done, they remove the flowers, they'll put it under their sink. Like, they'll put it in this colder, drafty place and also in a dark place for a certain amount of time, and then they'll put them back in the sun. And that difference in temperature and difference in light will trigger the orchid to rebloom. But I'm going to be honest with you, orchids are a whole thing in themselves, and I am not it's not my passion at all. So I would say go listen to this interview where the guest is extremely passionate about orchids, and you can learn more. But I'm in your boat. I get gifted orchids and I enjoy the blooms, and then I don't think I've gotten an orchid to rebloom personally yet, but I also just don't have that much of an interest. I have plenty of other blooming plants that I prefer.
Okay, I know I keep saying I'm going to wrap up, but I have so many questions. And so I want to ask you one more. I know orchids love humidity, and I know this because I've been to Costa Rica where orchids just bloom in the wild and they look gorgeous and it's amazing. And that's not happening in my house. So I'm wondering if there's anything I can do in the winter months to improve the humidity in my house. How about a humidifier? How about showering with the bathroom door open? Is there anything I could do to like help with the humidity factor in these dry, cold months?
Okay, great question. So let's zoom out for a minute and think about the natural environments that these houseplants are in. Most of our houseplants are tropical or subtropical plants. They're growing in the rainforest, in the jungle. They're climbing on the jungle floor, so they're lower light. That's why we can have them indoors, and then they climb up trees to look for light. Orchids are epiphytic, meaning they don't need soil. They literally attach with their roots. Their roots are so evolved that they attach to trees and basically let the rain run down the tree and soak up that water, right? So orchids, like, just as you said, they are just in little cracks in trees, like living their best life. Our indoor environments are nowhere close to the freaking rainforest, right? Like, you have to there is a level that you have to just kind of understand that on some level these plants are kind of set up for failure because they've been taken out of their natural environment. And no matter what, I have listeners, like super duper plant parents, that have multiple humidifiers on timers. So there's, humidity always going. And yet, like, it's still just not going to be the rainforest. They get wind, they have pollinators, they have animals, like moving around, rustling them up. That's just never going to happen indoors. So just like forgive yourself, understand that no matter what you do, we're not going to make our house a rainforest. Also, that would be terrible for our paint. But I have little hygrometers all over my house. Hygrometers are these little things that measure the humidity and the temperature of your house. And my humidity too is like in the 20s. It's terrible. And that's not good for your body. So yeah, if you want to supplement your humidity, humidifiers are definitely the way to go. Yes, it's an investment, but it's one investment that increases your, I mean, there's, if you want to read up on like the benefits of higher humidity for your human lungs, it's a worthwhile investment, let alone plants. A few tips with humidifiers. I have humidifiers that I diffuse essential oils in and make my whole like room smell incredible, which makes me really happy. But if you're going to use humidifiers, make sure that you wash them once a week because they can grow mold. And I had a very scary moment with my husband a couple of years ago. I thought I had cleaned a humidifier. It wasn't clean. And we woke up like almost choking in the middle of the night because there was some sort of mold there. So make sure you clean your humidifiers. Um, the pebble trays, I don't, the pebble tray humidity myth has kind of been debunked. It doesn't work as well, but if you group your plants together, it creates a microclimate. So your plants are transpiring, right? There's transpiring water. If you group your plants together, they kind of enjoy each other's transpiration. So instead of putting, one plant on this side of the room and one plant on this side of the room, there's a practice that you put your plants, in small groups so they can enjoy a little microclimate of humidity if you don't want to do the humidifier route. Um, the shower thing is interesting, and once or twice a year I put all my plants in the shower actually to mimic a rainfall and get like a really thorough clean. The only issue that I see with the shower is that the humidity, yes, raises temporarily, but it's not sustained for that entire day. um so yes, it temporarily gives your plants some relief, but then they're going back to that dry environment. So I think putting your plants in the bathroom and putting your plants under a shower for a good clean and a good, a really good soaking and watering is really good. I don't find for humidity, it makes a lasting effect. So with humidity, what I've found is the only real like tangible thing that's really going to make a difference is a humidifier.
Well, before we say goodbye, Maria, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what my listeners can hear on your podcast?
Yeah. Well, first off, if this episode, inspires you, go take my plant parent personality test. It's free. You get your plant parent personality. It's a great starting point for people who are new, and it's a fantastic opportunity to get some free recommendations on not only plants that fit your lifestyle, but some podcasts that are curated that I think would be interesting to you. But yeah, on Growing Joy, we're teaching you to care for plants. We've got episodes on how to water your plants, how to care for orchids, how to care for Hoya, how to care for low light plants. Honestly, I have like 200 episodes at this point. So whatever curiosity you have about plants, we have tutorials that will teach you how to be successful. But in a more exciting way, we also explore the plant person connection. So we have episodes on, do plants feel? What are the studies that prove that plants make people happy? What to do if you kill a plant? All sorts of really interesting explorations on how we can use plants to live a happier, more connected life. And we have amazing content lined up. We're doing a mini series on how to grow your own mushrooms indoors. If you're interested in growing mushrooms this year, it's really fun. So yeah, you should come over to my side of the podcasting universe and grow some joy with us. And I'm growing joy with Maria on all socials and my website. That's where you'll find my personality test as well, growingjoywithmaria.com/personality. And yeah, and the podcast is called Growing Joy, as is the book.
Well, Maria, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This is officially the longest interview I've ever conducted. So,
Really? Sorry, I talk so much.
no, no, I meant it more as I just am gleaning so much wisdom. I could ask even more questions.
Yes, I hope your listeners feel served and educated, and I'm here to just, educate and empower everyone. So, thank you. You asked great questions. Thanks for all your questions.